The holiday shopping season is in full swing with shoppers keen on finding deals, but with many customers getting ahead of their shopping for the year during Black Friday. Is there still more demand? That's the big question. Kearney Consumer Institute lead Katie Thomas joins us now to add her perspective on this topic. Katie, great to have you here with us. What are you seeing in the numbers and the sell-through of inventory as of right now, and where the appetites of consumers are holding strong versus where we're seeing some softness?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, this was a very long holiday season this year. You saw certain sales kick off in October with, big box retailers, e-commerce retailers, and really start to sell through some of that inventory. And in a lot of ways, that was a good idea because that helped them start to work through some of that inventory at a time where consumers were still shopping for themselves mostly. 87% of consumers told us they were shopping for themselves during those October sales and weren't totally ready to buy gifts yet. Now you're seeing sort of that push-pull tug of war with consumers and retailers in terms of what consumers actually want and what retailers feel like they're trying to work through and sort of get rid of. So it really depends on the retailer in terms of what their inventory position was and how much excess they had and how it aligned with what shoppers were looking for this season.
Which retailers do you think are having a lot of success just working through those inventories?
What we've really seen do well, Brian, is the ones that are on the top and the low end of the spectrum. So we've seen luxury continue to do well and specialty retailers that really know what they stand for. You think of some of the athleisure retails, athletic retailers that have very clear positionings and points of view. They've continued to be able to manage through some of that inventory, as well as discounters, where consumers are going in there. They feel like they know they can get a good deal. They know they can get the best bang for their buck. Where you're seeing some struggling is what we call the death of the middle. So those sort of middle retailers that aren't really sure what they stand for, saw really steep discounts at some of them up to 60% for Black Friday. That just goes to show just how much they're probably sitting on and trying to work through.
When all is said and done, where will we be at the end of this holiday season in terms of the inventory position for a lot of these retailers that have been oversupplied?
Yeah, I think, from a retailer side, there likely will still be a bit of an issue, just given that some of this inventory they're sitting on is simply because consumers already didn't want it. So even with heavy discounts, it can be hard to work through some of that. So it really just depends on, exactly what that alignment was. And on the consumer side, they were really looking for good deals. And so if it was a good deal, they were willing to pick up for it. But I think we'll still see a fair amount of retailers that are still struggling a bit with inventory and may just end up having to write off, kind of move on into the new season.
Now, what does that signal for not just the earnings and what the estimates are for some of these retail manufacturers, but also where that continues to kind of push the envelope for how much they can actually sell through to the consumer going into next year, too? If you've already got some of that weakness showing up during the holiday season where people are at least expected to spend, going into next year, it could be a totally different equation, and then the consumers are they're going to feel more of that burden if we do head into a mild recession.
Absolutely. To be honest, I'm a little bit more concerned about 2023 than I am about the holiday season. Right now, consumers will tell us they're concerned. They'll tell us that they have inflation on the brain, that they're thinking about pulling back spending. But historically, what we've seen is that people want to spend at the holidays. They want to buy those gifts. And frankly, the deals are so good and they are so across the board that consumers are willing to spend now. In reality, where you may start to see some of that pullback, especially as you start to really analyze by income groups and look at some of the medium to lower income groups. In the new year, that's where they're going to really be evaluating their wallet. They're not going to be picking up this excess inventory, these things that they don't really need. And throughout the pandemic, that's been the theme. What do I really need or want right now? That's what I'm buying, and I'm not buying anything else.
What does what we're seeing in retail also mean or translate for the travel industry as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's still it's a tough balance there as well in terms of what the price is, the availability, and consumers really wanting to get out. It's another area that's sort of right now being propped up by some higher income consumers who are still wanting to travel, willing to spend the money regardless of what it costs. But we'll see some stabilization in that. I mean, you're hearing it even with Walmart and other discounters saying, hey, we're seeing an influx of higher income consumers come in here because they want to get the best bang for their buck. So people are really evaluating where they want to spend and where they want to save. So travel will continue to be impacted in that same way of exactly how much do I feel like I can spend this year.
Katie, when you guys talk to your clients, like, given that it's a really tricky time, what are you telling them? Like, what's the key thing for retailers to do to succeed this holiday season?
You know, Julie, I would say, I mean, I'm a consumer advocate. So I would say at the end of the day, listen to your consumers, embrace, you know, again, understanding that they have inventory, they have to work through what they're really thinking about there. What are consumers telling you? What are your most loyal consumers looking for from you? What's the really, like, rely on them to kind of work through some of these challenges, as opposed to thinking like, oh, if I just discount it enough, or if I give X, Y, and Z deal, they'll definitely buy it. Really work with them to figure out how to manage through a lot of this inventory and understand, you know, individually, again, how they segment their consumers, where it feels like consumers are trading off versus still willing to spend. That's going to look different for each consumer individually, but really, you know, for these big retailers, they know their consumers well. They should be able to identify some of those trade-offs.
Kearney Consumer Institute lead Katie Thomas, always good to see you. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Brian.